Yeah, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Readings, where we're reading a beautiful book, The Soul by Rabbi Aiden Israel Steinsaltz, a wonderful modern-day Torah scholar who has now gone home to be with Hashem, but it's a joy to read his material for sure. And yesterday I think he was trying to get across something very important, giving us a lot of details about reincarnation and the makeup of the soul. And then I think he's leading into how our characteristics, our personal character traits, can help us link up with our soul. And so let's just review the last page that we did before we continue. It's more difficult for us to discern what the good inclination or conquering the evil inclination consists of. Makes sense? I'm sure everybody goes through that struggle. This is because if we develop the ability or the desire within our soul to avoid satisfying the basic needs of the body and soul, we may risk endangering our own existence. So it's kind of a cognitive dissonance in our mind that causes a conflict. For example, while there are people who eat more than necessary, who focus on food and think about it excessively, there are also those who distance themselves from food. Frequently, this does not reflect good character traits and restraint, but is characteristic of an illness. Yeah, like eating disorders. Yeah. In general, however, an approach of moderation indicates some level of functioning of the good inclination, whose main purpose is to satisfy natural needs. So this is what your good inclination is for, to satisfy natural needs without devoting too much time to thinking about them, as indicated by the verse, the righteous one eats to the satisfying of his desire, but the belly of the wicked shall lack. Proverbs 13:25. Shalom, Sheila and Ashley G. Always glad to have you ladies with us. We hope you're doing well out there. But isn't this verse, Proverbs 13:25, isn't this just such the case? The belly of the wicked shall lack. I mean, the wantonness of so many people doesn't realize to dawn on them how they're causing their own dissatisfaction in life. There are other inclinations that originate in the body and its desires, and despite the fact that they are not critical to existence, they are important. Sexual desire is not vital to an individual's existence, but it is critical for maintaining the continuity of humankind. The same is true of other urges, such as the need for rest. The question is, to what extent is the inclination necessary and unavoidable? What's a healthy balance? What are reasonable proportions? And what should be considered excessive? I know I've been hitting the gym a lot lately, and I find I've been body wanting to sleep more and recover, and you've got to know what right proportions are for sure. So now we're on the stage of non-physical inclinations. So this is non-physical inclinations. There are many inclinations that have nothing to do with the needs and desires of the body, but are spiritual impulses. What an amazing fact. Some of these non-physical desires exist in animals as well. These inclinations may indeed be manifested in material outcomes, but there is an abstract aspect that is not physical in itself, nor is there a desire for wrongdoing. Examples are a longing for things like prestige or money, or the existence of feelings such as jealousy. Yeah, they're abstract aspects for sure. Some inclinations are desires of the soul. These are fleeting for some, but become intense and life-transforming for others. One of these is the basic desire for knowledge. This isn't referring to what drives people to spend their time at school in order to train to work in a certain area, since there is often no component of desire or passion in such activity, which is often performed under duress, unless they're pursuing prestige. We are talking about the desire for knowledge for its own sake, and not the desire for knowledge to fulfill any kind of need. Okay, at least he clarifies that. The desire to know itself does not have a predetermined moral value. There are people whose thirst for knowledge will lead them to holy concerns, while others may dedicate their lives to accumulating more and more knowledge about the physical world and everything it contains. Sometimes the desire to know is focused on unimportant matters, such as soccer scores in the previous century, or even on matters that are clearly nefarious, whether in order to utilize the information or merely to enjoy the evil feeling accompanying such knowledge. In fact, there is an element of curiosity that exists to some extent within every one of us, and such curiosity can turn into an obsession. Whether it is for beauty, music, games, or many other things, these desires or inclinations are clearly neither physical nor, for the most part, evil. There are certain worldviews that see a perfect dichotomy between good and bad character traits, where bad character traits and any desire for them is like the evil inclination, which we are obligated to fight. On the other hand, there are good character traits, and the mere desire for them is already considered a manifestation of the good inclination. In Judaism, however, this division is not complete or unequivocal. On the contrary, the more profound approaches within our tradition entirely reject the concept of good character traits and bad character traits. Wow, that's a big statement. Even jealousy, desire, and honor-seeking, each of which the sages said remove a person from the world, cannot be categorically censored, since they can actually be a cause for good. For example, it is said that jealousy among the teachers increases wisdom. In a similar vein, the sages discussed the extent to which a person is permitted to possess the trait of pride, which can be positive in the appropriate context. Well, there you go. Conversely, even with regard to character traits that are usually viewed as wholly positive, a strong desire may exist that not only defines our course in life, but may even draw us into addiction. Such a phenomenon can occur with the desire for music or beauty as well, which can go beyond all limits and become an inner compulsion that has the power to distort other needs and desires. This phenomenon is even clearer in the case of attributes that are considered less desirable, and which may be as strong as a physical desire, such as the desire for money. This desire can be expressed in a moderate way by someone who is truly lacking, but it can also become an inclination that stands on its own, unrelated to the need for money or ability to spend it. It becomes all-consuming for those who desire it, because they want to acquire more money than they need, and more than they can spend. Yet this does not stop them from acquiring still more of it. Similarly, jealousy and the pursuit of prestige are traits that can reach murky depths that do not merely reflect a darkness of the nefesh, but become fertile ground for evil thoughts and repugnant fantasies to take root and lead people to commit terrible acts. I think that gives us some real explanation of the deceitfulness, the subtlety of the evil inclination, the way things are. This is where the scripture says there's a way that seems right unto man, but its end is destruction, and you end up getting out of balance for sure. However, as above, these inclinations in themselves are not necessarily bad. A distinction should be made between desire and the directions it causes a person to go in, and the ways in which it is expressed and realized. I saw a lot of this when I worked in the auto industry in sales, and it was a hamster wheel where you always had to sell more was always the and yet I seen people their beings, where they couldn't stop themselves from trying to get more out of every situation they were ever involved in. There are people for whom these ambitions can take on noble forms. For example, one who feels honored when in the company of sages or righteous people, or one who is envious of the sanctity of the angels, may achieve an elevation of the nefesh rather than a descent. The same is true for other desires that are considered worse or inferior to these, such as stinginess or hatred of other people. It all depends on the object they are applied to. The paradoxical verse, "You who love the Lord hate evil," Psalm 97:20, implies that there can be positive hatred. Hard to believe there can be positive hatred. And also that such hatred is a requirement addressed specifically to those whose nature contradicts it. They are encouraged to cultivate it because it is necessary in the reality of this world. Even the trait of stinginess appears in many forms that sometimes differ from one another only in their degree or direction. At times they are even praiseworthy, such as when they are expressed in frugality or moderation. It's only when it becomes, a bad trait that you can't control. In general, many of the non-physical desires of the nefesh cannot be judged by the names that were given to them, whether they are neutral or negative. The various desires of the nefesh can be viewed simply as tools in our hand. Most tools in the world have more than one use. Even the tools that seem the most innocent can be used for aggressive, negative purposes. Just as tools whose normal use is negative can be used for positive goals. The question of, say, a firearm. 200 years ago, it was necessary to own one for survival, for hunting. But, in this day and age, nobody's out there hunting for their food. It has a tendency to be used for aggressive, negative purposes. Of course, there are tools such as pots or dishes that are easier to use for positive purposes, or at the very least, purposes that do not distort the nefesh. But even tools that embody some degree of danger, such as knives, do not have to be employed as weapons, but may be used simply for slicing vegetables. Similarly, dynamite can be used for manufacturing bombs and also for building roads. We should relate to the traits of the nefesh in the same way. That's a big statement. There are traits that are normally positive and others that are commonly negative. However, in the broader picture of our aspirations and desires, distinguishing between good and evil does not entail identifying and sorting the needs and aspirations according to some sort of predefined method. What is important is the intelligent use of these desires in any given situation. This is a very, very huge statement. What is important is the intelligent use of these desires in any given situation. Generosity and tolerance, generally considered positive traits, often express as weakness or the inability to set limits. Similarly, excessive generosity can lead to a variety of negative traits within its recipients, such as parasitism, lack of consideration for others, or unlimited desires, while excessive tolerance can express lack of interest or even apathy, and thus serve as a backdrop for the development of many types of evils. These are things to really think about. It follows that there are no simple, unequivocal parameters with which to evaluate the results of our actions or even the urges that lead to them. For better or worse, there are no colors or shapes in our soul that enable us to distinguish between these urges easily. The complexity of human existence weaves intricate patterns within which we cannot immediately or easily differentiate between good and evil, between the summit and the abyss. All of this is important, not only with regard to educating children, but for relating to people in general. Parents and teachers, preachers and authors frequently take the easy path by sorting the content of the human soul into simple, unambiguous categories. However, these divisions are not necessarily true to real life. The statement of the prophet Jeremiah that the heart is deceitful above all things and it is exceedingly weak, who can know it? From Jeremiah 17:9 is much closer to the truth. The evil inclination is not an independently defined unit, but part of the entire physical spiritual package that is the human being. Whoa, what a statement. The evil inclination is not an independently defined unit, but part of the entire physical spiritual package that is in the human being. What is common among the inclinations is that they are inclinations, meaning that their primary source is not in the mind, but in a certain urge that exists within us. In order for it to be realized, this urge indeed needs the tools of the nefesh, such as the power of thought and action, but the dominant activating power will always be an inclination, an attraction or longing of the nefesh. It is true that in practice, our rational minds may be capable of overriding the inclination and leading us in a certain direction, but at its root, that same primary, primal, powerful inclination element still exists. Some scholars relate to the ensemble of human inclinations as our animal soul, meaning the component of the human beings that makes us part of the animal world, a creature among creatures. This definition is more accurate than the definition of inclinations as good or evil. Since almost all human inclinations, as above, are morally neutral, neither intrinsically good nor bad, their tendency towards good or evil depends to a great extent on the way they are managed and applied. This also explains why the general definition of inclinations, including those that we share with the animals, doesn't include only desires that every animal is capable of fulfilling. Some human inclinations are typically human in the sense that they do not exist among animals, at least not on the same level. But even assuming that they are unique to human beings, even when these inclinations take on abstract and sublime forms, they are still part of the manifestation of man as a biological creature. The inclination that motivates human beings to acquire knowledge or create objects of beauty is essentially no different from the inclination that motivates birds to fly. Just as the bird wants to fly because it has wings, so do we want to use our brains because we have them. Inclinations, especially ones that lack material parameters, are unlimited. So they can become infinitely powerful and develop into different directions. Despite their neutral essence, they are like vigorous streams bursting out of the depths. When we lose control of them, they can become as destructive as boiling lava, but when they are limited and directed to good ends, they are powerful forces that create good in this world. Not only that, while animals have powerful instinctual systems that drive their inclinations and also limit them, human beings almost completely lack such systems, and we must construct them on our own based on the foundations given to us through education, society, and acquired knowledge. I'm trying to think of this like in a court of law, the way a judge tries to look for that mensa rea, that intent of the mind, the guilty mind, in their action. So, this means that the human mechanism that attempts to limit the inclination is what creates these struggles. The human mechanism that attempts to limit the inclination is what creates these struggles. The driving force behind each inclination is a primal power that is not a product of organized thought or conscious desire, but an independent entity. However, both the general tendency of the inclination as well as the actual use to which it is put, are built on the power of the human being to regulate these inclinations to control them. The rational parts of the human being are merely tools for implementation, not a basic part of our makeup. That's a big statement, too. Since, in its essence, the good inclination is not an intense desire whose weight is equal to that of other inclinations, but rather a structure, an alignment that we must maintain as we attempt to remain within the limits it sets out. This is why mankind's struggle with his inclination is always a difficult battle. Pure evil. Woo. In addition to the many different inclinations, there is one that is apparently unique to human beings, which, while often called the evil inclination, is less prevalent than the other inclinations and is not always as powerful as they are. This is the desire to do wrong, not for any particular reason such as enjoyment or benefit, but for the sake of doing evil. The human nefesh contains an attraction to evil that at times completely contradicts logic and even the desire for pleasure. Such a tendency can appear even within a young child who may cause harm just because it is forbidden. Among adults, especially those with developed minds, this tendency towards evil can be extremely destructive. At times, people can even rationalize this desire, just as they can rationalize other inclinations. In Jewish literature, this inclination is called Amalek. It can manifest in insignificant material matters, but may also take on literary or even philosophical forms. However, unlike the other aspects of the nefesh, which can be channeled and refined, this aspect of it is an entity of pure evil and is incorrigible. This is why the Torah commands us to eradicate it completely. Thankfully, Amalek as a social phenomenon is not the driving force in the world, although it does exist. What is more prevalent is what is called, poetically, the seed of Amalek. This refers to the small seed of evil that can exist in the soul of any person, which is like a poison that interferes with everything within and can even lead to our demise. The only way to rectify matters is to utterly eradicate it by using the sublime powers of the soul. This can be accomplished only by means of prayer and request for divine assistance. Free will. Free will is a complex topic with all sorts of philosophical, theological, and scientific dimensions. But boiled down to its basic assumption, free will is the notion that we human beings are endowed with the freedom to choose our destiny. The opposite of free will is determinism, or causality, cause and effect. And from this outlook, everything has a cause, and the cause has a cause, creating a continuous chain of cause and effect. You ever notice people that always cite the blame game? They're always always trying to cite cause. So they're really stuck in this cause and effect when they have to blame. And this is where the rabbis are clearly, defining the line between the opposite of free will as determinism. They had to do it. Therefore, we could say that every occurrence, whether in the physical world or in our thoughts, is the result of everything that preceded it. While this is undeniably true, there is still room within this point of view to accommodate free will. For example, our subjective sense tells us that we are capable of choosing. Of course, there are limits to this ability, but we are aware of them, so they do not negate the perception of the ability to choose completely. But the best case that can be made for free will is our ability to cast doubt upon it. If there is no free will, then there is no freedom of thought either, since every thought, as well as every observation, understanding, or perception, is the net result of all the causes that preceded it. Doubt and skepticism must, therefore, assume the existence of free will, which enables us to choose not only between good and evil, but between truth and untruth. Yeah, that's a big statement. We're not always choosing between good and evil, but between truth and untruth. Nevertheless, we do live in a world of causality in which events materialize not at will, but because of other forces. In the case of inanimate objects or non-sentient creatures such as plants, the active forces are physical and chemical. In the case of creatures who possess consciousness, such as humans, the active forces are determined not necessarily by choice, but by conditioning, whether hereditary, cultural, or educational. Within the forces that are active in reality as we perceive it, there is an entire system of causality that determines the course of everything in creation, from the movements of the celestial bodies to the tiny movements of leaves or bacteria. And everything is, as matter of necessity, part of this causal system in which one thing leads to another, whether the causes and effects derive from natural forces or divine decree. It does appear to preclude the possibility that humankind or anyone or anything else ever has the option to make choices about their destiny. Furthermore, causality does not relate exclusively to the elements of the material world. Scripture and Kabbalah both teach us that even heavenly beings, despite having far more power and understanding than humans, in certain respects have in a manner similar to animals and objects. An angel may be more powerful than a human being, but an angel does not have any more free will than a steamroller. This is a real key point that if you come out of Christianity, you need to grasp. Although governed by a different set of rules and forces than those at work in the material world, these beings are still subject to constraints of determinism. An angel cannot change his role, just as a pine tree cannot turn into a date palm. They are also confined to their respective modes of existence, to the same laws that guide existence in its entirety. Therefore, the universe, in the broader sense, including both material and spiritual realms, is a system whose processes are limited and whose movements are predetermined, following a fixed plan. The sovereignty of Hashem, for sure. So where does free will fit into all of this? This question gives rise to another question that is both philosophical and quintessentially religious. Is the chain of causality affected solely by the causes that created it, or can the decisions and actions of human beings alter it? It's a very fair question. This problem cannot be solved by means of the mind alone. It is a matter of faith. Do we believe that the world has a purpose? In the entire expanse of the universe, there are only two beings that have free will: God above and human beings below. The divine spark within man is the spark of free will. Mankind is a unique presence in this world in the sense that we have the ability to move within reality and shape it in accordance with our wishes, that is, in accordance with our conscious or unconscious decisions. A storm, a cloud, and a flame all have a determined, defined structure. Ants and grasshoppers have a fixed route, but only human beings can make decisions that can change these systems. Mankind's possibilities are limited from a physical and spiritual point of view, but his ability to choose is unlimited. Yeah, know the difference. In the account of creation, the Bible relates that God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that creeps upon the earth," from Genesis 1:28. This promise of human control of the world is not immediately realizable because any one individual may not be able to utilize all available possibilities. Similarly, the human race as a whole needs a sufficient amount of time as well as the appropriate conditions to discover the possibilities embodied in this freedom. Mankind's free will not only gives us the possibility to go beyond the fixed path determined by time and place, but also enables us to harness the various forces together or in opposition to one another in order to create changes in the material and spiritual worlds. This is why human beings are capable of creating poems and songs, even though we do not have the voice of a nightingale, while no nightingale is capable of composing even the simplest rhyme. The psalmist, with a mixture of thanks and wonder, declares, "You have made him but a little lower than God. You have put all things under his feet," from Psalms 8, verses 5 and 6. In his ability to truly change and be changed, man is comparable to God alone. Free will gives mankind the ability to choose, but since it's a freedom, it doesn't dictate what we choose. What a statement. This is why people are capable of performing both sublime acts and abhorrent crimes. Mankind's ability to rise above mountains and angels is the same capability that permits us to fall to the most profound depths, to be more putrid than a carcass and more poisonous than a snake, since the essence of freedom is the possibility to move in opposing directions. Free will necessarily includes the ability to choose evil. So human error is the result of a bad choice. Although it is not always intentional, it invariably stems from free will. It follows that the commission of sins and transgressions, as well as the fulfillment of commandments and the performance of good deeds, result from that same freedom. Although free will is absolute in principle, and the decision to turn left or right, to move up or down, depends on man alone, in reality, there are constraints. If we must choose between two paths, one of which is strewn with rocks, mud, and other hazards, while the other is pleasant and convenient, our decisions will be biased. However, free will includes an override option. Many who gave their lives for the sanctity of God's name faced an unbalanced choice, but it seems that even when their bodies could not withstand the ordeal, their spirits, meaning their inner ability to choose, remained unharmed. Of course, despite the existence of free will, it is possible to force people into slavery or cause them to make declarations that they do not believe in, but this does not damage their free will in its purest form. Only in rare cases, the understanding of which requires additional study, can it be said that God takes away an individual's free will. And since free will is the essence of man's soul, when it is taken away from him, he ceases to be human and becomes a mere object, an earthenware shard. Because mankind has the freedom to choose, it would seem that even God can only ask us to behave in a certain way, but not force us. Consider the following verse: "I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore choose life that you may live," from Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. Such a choice should be obvious, but even with such simple decision, we are still implored to therefore choose life. Mankind's capacity to choose freely, then, is the manifestation of the divine in the human being, since only we humans can extricate ourselves from the chain of causality. Dreams, plans, and aspirations. While we live in the present, we can remember the past. The future, on the other hand, is completely unknown, but that doesn't stop us from thinking about it. There are three kinds of thoughts that we have about the future: dreams, plans, and aspirations. Whether the future seems secure and promising or whether it is a source of fear and worry, these will always be the ways in which we relate to it. Dreams. From childhood, dreaming or imagining is the first apprehension of the future that we develop. Dreams in this context are, of course, conscious, usually waking dreams, which include imaginings, expectations, or ideas that we use to picture our future. Some are short and fragmented, such as, I want to be X. But some are long, complex ideations of what we want to happen in the future. Some of these conscious dreams are simple and realistic, while others are highly imaginative and disconnected from reality. A young child can talk about aspirations for the future very concisely. For example, when I am big, I will be a policeman, or when I grow up, I will be a firefighter. This is an elaboration of a dream or wish with no imaginative component, and it may very well come true. But a child, and even more so an adult, may also harbor grandiose dreams whose chances of being realized are far smaller or even non-existent, such as, I will be a millionaire, I will be a famous author, or I will be a king. Yet this does not prevent the dreamer from dreaming them. There are dreamers who express with simplicity a future desire or wish, while others spend a significant amount of time every day imagining the future. There are others whose dreams about the future become almost a replacement for real life and at times actually disrupt daily life. And just as there are people who dream of every possible topic in the world, from dreams about a certain life course to dreams about love and so on, there are dreamers who dream not only about themselves but also about a group of people, even an entire nation. The common denominator of the innumerable dreams that we have about the future is their detachment from reality. They are wishes, which normally do not create anything but a personal experience for the dreamer. In most cases, they do not involve ways of bringing the wishes to fruition. Indeed, we can continue to dream the very same dream for years, expressing desires and wishes and nothing more. In this sense, dreams about the future are expressions of certain aspects of the soul's wishes, while most dreams of ordinary people, whether they are normally neutral or about inappropriate negative acts, are expressions of the nefesh in the most simple, lowest sense. Dreams can also reflect higher levels of the soul. Thus, just as one person may dream of being extremely wealthy, another may dream of becoming a great Torah scholar or a righteous, holy person. Moreover, conscious dreams, which are expressions of the conscious mind, are continually created and changing, just as consciousness is continually evolving. And since these dreams are connected to our consciousness, there is clearly a difference between the dreams of a child and the dreams of an adult, depending on the individual's evolving wishes and knowledge of the world. You ever noticed some people grow up with fanciful notions as youth and they just can't let them go, and they live in a delusional world. Plans. Another type of contemplation of the future comes in the form of plans. Plans, too, are structures relating to what might occur or what we desire to occur in the future. However, unlike dreams, plans involve seeking or constructing modes of implementation. Plans, especially detailed plans, are usually made at mature ages. However, even children whose ability to manage or calculate matters is more limited can have real plans that include at least some kind of outline for implementation, and at times even more than that. In any case, whether the plan is, we will play soccer the day after tomorrow, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to pay my debts to the bank, a plan, as opposed to a dream, is meant to be implemented. A dream turns into a plan when a layer of practicality and a list of actions are added. That's real good advice. The transition from a dream to a plan removes the matter from the realm of the nefesh and brings it closer to the real world. What an explanation. While a dream can provide a feeling of satisfaction, a plan requires a certain degree of effort and action. A plan is therefore an action of creating the future, although the future can, of course, disrupt or destroy plans. As with dreams, the content of plans can vary dramatically from person to person. A significant part of our lives is spent creating and realizing plans, no matter whether they are short-term or long-term, and no matter what the content. Even an expression such as, "I want to go to the grocery store," is a kind of plan that requires action and implementation. But a plan such as, "I am going to medical school," or "I want to build a factory," is more complex and requires sustained attention to the relevant modes of implementation. When King Solomon said, "Many plans are in a man's heart," from Proverbs 19:21, he was referring to the myriad plans people make. All plans are tapestry woven from the hopes of the nephesh and the reality of the world. What might seem to be a working plan could turn out to be an almost unobtainable dream. And since each of us has limited possibilities in this world, certain plans may not be realized at all. Willpower, on the other hand, and external conditions, on the other, are important factors that will lead either to the plan's implementation or to its stagnation in the dream stage. The scope of the plans and their practicality also play an important role. It is sad but true that some people make very few plans. If life dishes up harsh difficulties or financial or emotional distress, then all energy is channeled into survival, leaving little time to think about the future. Aspirations. Every working plan or outline for action includes a fundamental goal or an overall desire that underpins dreams and plans. Hey, Cookie. In order to understand this fundamental goal, we must ask, what does the planner aspire to in principle? Most of us have more than one aspiration. Some have many. We tend to classify them according to the importance we attribute to each one. Aspirations can be nothing more than the sum total of our desires. But they can also consist of higher yearnings and even elements associated with the foundations of the soul. When we create plans, we aspire to specific goals that our plans are meant to promote. These aspirations could be for prestige, power, fame, or money, but could also be for tranquility, respite, or security in old age, or for accomplishing great things. But even if we lack significant aspirations, it doesn't mean we aren't thinking about the future. It only indicates that our plans for the future are not focused on specific values, so they tend to have limited scope. Our aspirations do not always derive from clear thinking or profound reflection. At times, we build our lives, meaning our future, in a certain way because we are part of society that defines aspirations in that way. During periods of introspection, as well as periods of distress, we are often able to understand what motivates us. For example, suppose you are planning to build as many huge buildings as possible. At a certain point, you may be asked by yourself or others, why are you doing this? A genuine response to this question might be because doing so enables me to make a lot of money, or because I desire fame and prestige. On the other hand, the motivating factor could be the desire to create or just do something new. In any case, the more clearly we understand our desires, the more focused and directed our plans will be. Alternatively, we may cancel or change our plans entirely when our true motivation becomes apparent. That's even, when it becomes apparent even to ourselves. Thus, for example, the realization that our true aspiration is to acquire security for ourselves and our families may cause us henceforth to follow a completely different course, or to accomplish exactly what we had planned in the first place, but in a different way or in a different method. These yearnings of the heart that appear in the form of aspirations may be low-key. At other times, they may be agitated and pervasive, not allowing any respite. For example, in the case of a love of money that appears in the form of an uncontrollable passion, the verse states, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money," from Ecclesiastes 5:9. The same goes for other desires such as prestige, control, or power, which can become an obsession that pushes aside all other concerns. The all-encompassing nature of an aspiration is sometimes especially obvious in people who have actually fulfilled their wishes, but it can be obvious in people who are driven by desires that they are unsuccessful in satisfying. The heart's desires are in fact the foundation of our aspiration and plans. In addition to all kinds of ordinary desires, whether noble or more self-oriented, there are desires of a baser order. Vengeance is a prime example. If vengeance against one person, a few people, or a group becomes a significant component of someone's larger plans, then years or an entire lifetime can be spent in this sad and unproductive way. Examples of this in the world of literature are Max and Moritz by Willem Busch and The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Hatred is another example. It can be fleeting phenomenon or the leitmotif of a life. Yeah, consuming the bones. Yeah. Happily, the overarching desires of most people are noble, or if not noble, at least harmless, and they develop their life's paths in that direction. Such is the case for those who aspire to help people in distress. Others aspire to beauty in all its forms, whether in the visual arts, music, or literature. For these people, the desire for beauty is not merely a sensitivity or an inclination, but the driving force in their life. For others, the desire may be to acquire knowledge, and they, too, plan and construct their lives in accordance with this desire. There are also people whose heart's desire is to worship God, and their lives are directed along paths for realizing this aspiration, perhaps by observing commandments, praying, or studying Torah. Even such abstract desires are particularized into many plans of action, all of which are directed towards the greater goal of sanctity. We can say that the entire Jewish people was given the task of performing certain acts and also the overriding admonishment, and you shall be holy, from Leviticus 11:44, so that education, study, and life plans are all meant to be directed towards this end. In general, it could be said that these overarching desires are the most stable expression of the manifestation of the soul within us. Wow. Great souls have great wishes, while small souls have small wishes. Lower souls may turn to lower, even undesirable pursuits, while higher souls, holy souls, will be led to discovering higher levels of the soul while realizing the overall desire of their personal lives. Although we do not choose our own soul or the way in which it reveals itself, each one of us is capable of discovering more noble elements within ourselves. Wow. The inner work before us is to find a way to access the higher levels of our soul. Then we must cause those higher levels to be manifest within our lives. Well, that makes such clear sense. What people search for within themselves, they will find. There are many processes that enable us to access the higher levels of our soul and also to express them to a greater or lesser extent. Some undergo a one-time or sudden epiphany, while others need a great deal of time to access these higher levels. The sages have said that mankind is of the dust of the ground, from Genesis 2:7. And yet we are considered to be like God, as the verse states, I will be like the Most High, from Isaiah 14:14. Humankind is capable of going beyond the realms of speech, action, and thought to achieve a state where lofty matters become their own overriding desire. Listening to the soul. The soul within us is always present, and is always speaking to us, but it is usually a still small voice that is overshadowed or silenced by many louder voices within us and from the world around us. I think we can all agree with that. Our body, for example, has a powerful voice that can almost never be ignored, and it often silences the whisper of the soul. One of the ways we can hear the voice of our soul is by disconnecting from the noises of the environment. At times, this detachment happens spontaneously when we find ourselves alone, for instance, without anything to distract our thoughts. But in cases we don't often happen to find ourselves alone with our thoughts, we can create such an environment for ourselves. In certain places, or in accordance with certain traditions, aspiring practitioners are sent off to be alone for a specific period of time, not for the experience, but in order to develop the capability of listening to their inner voice. It is said that some of the prophets would go off to the desert as a way to achieve that kind of listening. When we are surrounded by people and spend our time observing others, even if we refrain from speaking or doing anything whatsoever, we certainly do not achieve solitude. Forgive me. Solitary meditation, or hitbodedut, is one way to minimize, if not eliminate, surrounding noises. The idea is to create an internal environment in which external disturbances are neutralized. Even if you cannot find a place to meditate in seclusion, you can teach yourself to achieve the same effect even when you are not entirely alone. It is even possible to meditate in this way when lying in bed or when surrounded by people. This is why I enjoy doing this meditation class with Hashi Skobak, Rabbi Skobak's wife. At least she's taking time to give us techniques to slow down and focus. This type of meditation, however, requires a concerted effort and practice to isolate and neutralize environmental interference. It is a common misconception that the ability to disconnect in this way is an inborn trait or a unique spiritual capability. Most of us are capable, with sufficient effort, of focusing on one topic and ignoring the sights and sounds in the environment. All of us, probably at one time or another, have been caught daydreaming, and while thus engaged, do not see or hear a thing that is happening around us. I get that often from my wife. I told you. Yet it's always while I'm deeply focused on something and she's walking away talking in different direction. Yeah. In almost every classroom, there are at least one or two students who seem always in their own world and display no connection to the reality surrounding them. Almost all of us are capable of achieving this kind of detachment if we really desire it. But this is not exactly what meditation in seclusion is about. Hitbodedut is a state in which we can hear our own soul to some degree. In order to do this, we must ignore only external stimuli, but even those we create within ourselves. The whispering voice of the soul has many facets, and it speaks of diverse matters. The soul speaks, whispers, makes comments, raises doubts, and asks questions about matters that the ostensibly all-encompassing structure of life does not address at all. Questions such as, what did I do? Why am I doing what am I planning to do? All belong to the same category. The voice of a soul that is unhappy about where it is being led. But the longer we manage to listen, the more we are able to hear a single whisper that says, maybe it is possible to choose differently. Those who are good at listening to the messages this inner voice relays are able to achieve amazing changes in their life. Yeah, that's what a lot of meditation does. The need to listen to the soul is not a luxury, but a genuine necessity. both for those who already pay attention to it and those who are entirely unaware of it. As with essential vitamins, whose absence does not awaken an intense desire to fill the void, but is nevertheless capable of causing weakness, disease, and even death, listening to the soul is also a vital need, even though this imperative is not keenly felt by many. The main significance of listening to the soul does not specifically relate to details, that is, performing certain actions or refraining from them. It is something more fundamental that involves finding a general direction in life. Life's events lead people in different directions. For many, life is entirely random, while others find their way intentionally and with forethought in order to realize their plans and dreams. However, even a path that we tread through conscious choice is not necessarily the correct path for us. We can walk on a paved road overlooking a breathtaking view, but still discover that we are marching energetically in the wrong direction entirely. Similarly, we may not merely survive, but even flourish while treading a life path that is leading us in the wrong direction. Listening to the soul's voice is a kind of navigation in which we face fundamental issues. When God asked man, "Where are you?" in Genesis 3, verse 9, he was not asking for geographical information, nor was he even referring to any one point in time. He was interested in man's direction, his aspirations. Where are you? And this question still stands. Every person is asked it. It is a question that relates to the essence of our lives and is meant to define our role and direct our paths. Nevertheless, it is easy and common to ignore the intensity of the question and the number of reasons and excuses we provide for failing to address the question. Either God or ourselves is infinite. When we do reach a point where we listen to our soul, we may hear it in a number of different ways. If we reach this point following years of disconnection, after a lifetime filled with noise in which we did not hear any inner voices, we will not hear the voice within us in full clarity. It will more likely be heard as an almost imperceptible murmur. We might feel amazed that we have a soul at all, like someone who has a relative in a distant country whom he happens to meet after years passed with absolutely no contact. He is awestruck over the fact that the relative is still alive. As we begin to listen with concentration to the voice of our soul, however, it gradually becomes clear. It is not always a response to our recent past or present life. At times it might cause us to recall old and forgotten experiences. But if we listen to the voice persistently, either at the time it first makes itself heard or even only later on, we will not only understand that we have a soul, but we will also begin to hear what it is saying about our current existence. Not only the errant among us, but even the righteous may live without feeling the presence of the soul. Still, there is a difference between the voice of the soul speaking to a person who dwells in the courtyards of the Lord, from Psalms 92:14, and one who is standing at the edge of the abyss. The former, the soul, may say something like, "You have done well, but you have forgotten me." While the latter, it may be a great cry, "What have you done to yourself? Look where you are now." With our wonderful free will, we humans can choose to ignore the voice of the soul and even make an effort to silence it. By the same token, we can choose to make far-reaching decisions based upon that voice, not only in our thoughts, but in practice also. Extraordinary or one-time events can jolt us into listening to your soul, but minor events can also. However, the advice of the poet, "Pay attention to the soul," is a call to listen to the soul continuously, not only in the face of a rare event or at the end of life, but as an ongoing and focused inner spiritual process. When we deliberately silence the noise of life and listen instead to the inner voice of our soul, we can achieve the level of a person's soul will teach him. Those who attain this exalted level may be completely different from one another in all respects, but they all have a kind of inner illumination that is visible even to others, and that shows that they have been able to hear their soul. The more we are able to listen to our soul, the more its voice will affect our lives and the way we understand the world. Wow. And that's the author. Rabbi Aiden Steinsaltz. Yeah, he was the high priest of the Sanhedrin between 2004 and 2008. I looked up some of his bio. He founded some universities, one in Russia even, and vast number of works. But he's best known for the Steinsaltz edition of the Talmud, where he wrote the entire Talmud and commentary. I think he started, or it was published in the late 60s, and then was translated into many other languages. And you're talking a profound modern-day Torah giant who went home to be with the Lord in 2020 of pneumonia. It was probably maybe COVID-related, I don't know. But Rabbi Aiden Steinsaltz is a teacher, philosopher, social critic, and prolific author who has been hailed by Time magazine as a once-in-a-millennium scholar. His lifelong work in Jewish education earned him the Israel Prize, his country's highest honor. Born in Jerusalem in 1937 to secular parents, Rabbi Steinsaltz studied physics and chemistry at Hebrew University. He established several experimental schools, and at the age of 24 became Israel's youngest school principal. In 1965, he began his monumental Hebrew translation and commentary of the Talmud. By 2010, all 44 volumes were completed and in process of translation to English, with the majority already in print as this book goes into press. The rabbi's classic work of Kabbalah, 13 Petaled Roses, was first published in 1980 and has been translated into 8 languages. In all, Rabbi Steinsaltz has authored some 60 books and hundreds of articles on subjects ranging from zoology to theology, and he often engages in social commentary as well. Continuing his work as a teacher and spiritual mentor, Rabbi Steinsaltz established a network of schools and educational institutions in Israel and the former Soviet Union. He has served as a scholar in residence in the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Studies in Washington, D.C., and the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton University. His honorary degrees include doctorates from Yeshiva University, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, Bilan Universities, Brandeis University, and Florida International University. Rabbi Steinsaltz lived in Jerusalem. He and his wife, they had 3 children and many grandchildren. And sadly, he passed on in 2020. Yeah, what an interesting author for sure. I wanted to get some exposure to his material after I did a lot of research to try to find something fresh for you guys to view, and I wanted to do something that wasn't so long, because I find that when the book's too long, the number of people that follow the whole book tend to drop off, and sadly, when that happens, people aren't getting the full teaching of whatever the rabbi wanted to share. So yeah, since we restarted Rocky Mountain Readings, we've gone through Sefer HaKarim, which was quite a long book. We did do Duties of the Heart, The Gate of Trust by Rabbi Pakuda, which was only one section of the Duties of the Heart, chapter 4. We went through Derech Hashem, which only took us 5 days to read, and now The Soul by Rabbi Steinsaltz, which only took 4 sessions. But in the past, I remember this book, The Talmud, a biography. I really enjoyed that because it gave you the historical view of the Talmud. Nefesh Chachaim, one of my favorites. Tales from the Zohar, Mystic Tales from the Zohar. I didn't care for that one as much, but it was interesting. This Everyday Holiness by Alan Morenis was a beautiful work. We read Yes to Life by Viktor Frankl, the Gaon of Vilna and his Messianic Vision, one here called The Golem, and the Maharal of Prague. That was interesting. We read the Rambam's Guide for the Perplexed. Oh, that was a long one as well. Never Get Angry Again. Believe it or not, this one's got about 5,500 views on the first session, and I still get a lot of views on this, more on this than what we've been reading of recently. And it must be a lot of people out there trying to find answers to deal with anger. And I found that Dr. David J. Lieberman did a great job with that book. In that same light, we went on to Words That Hurt and Words That Heal by Joseph Telushkin, Rabbi Telushkin. Wonderful message. We read Ahavat Hesed by the Chafetz Chaim, and in times past I've read the book Win by Rabbi Stephen Bars out of Washington. I did a whole broadcast series with him a number of years ago. Plus we read a few other books where I read on paperback that are not here, but on that note, I've enjoyed The Soul by Rabbi Steinsaltz, wonderful author. I'm glad to get the exposure to his literature. I thought it was written well, definitely edited well, considering the man had had a stroke 2 years before this book was released. So he literally, a man of his caliber can't just sit around. His ideas are floating around like marbles in the brain, and he's got to put something down. And I can just see when you're challenged with the notion of not having control of your physical body and able to do what you were used to doing, the soul has got to be a topic of aspiration. I think he touched on some beautiful, beautiful points for sure. Yeah, I think he's really brought to our minds about how our character traits stem and meet and mingle and root from our honest soul. And I liked how he closed that out in the end on the I like how he pulled those three listening to the soul. But this chapter before that went into those three parts of life: dreams, plans, and aspirations. And how it can be, out of the voice of your own soul, and part of the purpose that God has placed you here in this specific time to do something that only you have the tools and the mixture to do. I mean, when you think about recipes of, say, a soup, every different soup is different because of different ingredients. Well, each one of you is got unique ingredients that make up you, and to achieve your potential based upon what Hashem has designed for you to do. I think it helps us to explore within ourselves and make dreams, plans, and aspirations and put it into practice. So much in that book that I'm confident, very, very, very useful for sure. And I'm not sure what I want to read next, but if anybody has a suggestion, feel free to drop it. Sheila says this was an interesting and appreciated read, and Ashley G says much wisdom in the book. Yes, Ashley, I can tell that Rabbi Steinsaltz was obviously a high caliber scholar, but I looked at the weight of the book, and one critic had said is more like a glorified essay rather than a whole book. It's obviously not a thick book, and therefore we were able to cover it in roughly four readings. But does anybody have suggestions? You want longer or shorter works? I don't want to be reading things I'm getting through in one session. That's just, there's no meat to it. I find even the most concise authors, especially Torah scholars, they tend to tackle large topics. And so if somebody's got a suggestion they would like me to read, I will be scouring for something to start fresh with on Monday. So if you've got something you want me to read along Torah-oriented theme, drop the comment in the chat box, and I'll see if I can find a Kindle edition for it. And I've been looking at some of the Laser Brody's material online. I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent at this point, but I've got a few ideas. But I'll keep a lookout, and we will come back on Monday with a new book. And please, I appreciate all the support, and I appreciate the regulars that do come out and listen. It means a lot to me. Because for me, this is personal time of study, personal time of reading. I have read a lot of other books in the last couple of months, aside from what we've read here, and I try to weigh it, and I think, is it worth putting out there or not? But then again, too, if it's not available on a Kindle edition. Anyways, yeah, Ashley says shorter works are nice. Yeah, it's nice when you can finish it in like 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions. It seems to be a fine level. When it's longer than that, I find it gets to be, I don't want to be reading 4-6 weeks on one particular book. Not that there's tons of books. The one I'm reading right now has got like 11 volumes, and yeah, there's no way I could read it publicly. I'm sure I would have rabbis saying that's out of bounds. There's no need to be reading that material as a Noahide. So my rabbi says I'm clear to read it. I'm digging into what I need to dig into for personal growth and development. But be true to your soul. Connect with Hashem. Walk in a Torah path, and acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He will direct your steps. So we'll be back Monday with more Rocky Mountain readings. Till then, bye for now.